Good morning and thank you all for joining us. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Wednesday, June 17th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Shin Se-min. Before we get started, here are the stories we're following at this hour. The North Korean army says it'll militarize two zones near the border, the Inter-Korean Business Zone in the city of Kaesong and the Mount Kumgang Tourist Zone in the east. The regime flat out rejected Seoul's calls for special envoys, calling it an unrealistic proposal. We have correspondents covering this from all angles. North Korea's demolition of the Inter-Korean Liaison Office sparks international criticism, with major powers in the region all voicing the need to de-escalate the tensions. The EU also calls on the regime to avoid further counterproductive steps. The India-China border disputes turns deadly for the first time in decades. Dozens have been injured from the showdown, a major escalation of a weeks-long standoff between two of Asia's heavyweights. We begin this newscast with the worrying uptick in inter-Korean tensions. Less than 24 hours after North Korea blew up the Inter-Korean Liaison Office, turning it into a pile of dust and ash, the North now says it'll redeploy troops and resume military exercises near the Inter-Korean border. Now, this is the latest round in a series of actions the North has taken against South Korea in recent days in apparent anger over anti-Pyongyang leaflets flown by activists south of the border. For more on this, we connect to our Kim Ji-yeon at Seoul's Defense Ministry. So, Ji-yeon, it looks like North Korea is raising the stakes on a daily basis.
Yes, as you mentioned, North Korea has made it official that it'll carry out measures to nullify the Inter-Korean Comprehensive Military Agreement forged in 2018 in a bid to reduce tensions. In a statement carried by the state-run Korean Central News Agency this morning, the General Staff of the Korean People's Army said it will resume, quote, all kinds of regular military exercises near the border, which will raise the heat even further. As many have predicted, the North said it'll redeploy units at the regiment level and necessary firepower units to the Mount Kumgang tourist area, as well as the Kaesong Industrial Complex. And it's just not along these areas, both places that signify inter-Korean peace and reconciliation. The North states that artillery units will be deployed along the whole front line, including the southwest naval front close to the boundary. It also stated it will set up guard posts along the demilitarized zone that it had agreed to withdraw from under the military deal and open areas along the border to support North Koreans sending anti-Seoul propaganda leaflets into South Korea. Seoul's defense ministry has reiterated to the North that it must stick to the military pact for the sake of peace on the Korean peninsula. And after the destruction of the Inter-Korean Liaison Office, the South Korean military said it will respond firmly if North Korea conducts an aggressive military action. And the South Korean military has raised the level of monitoring along the military demarcation line and has ordered all commanding officers near the border to maintain their positions in case of further provocations. Back to you, Se-min.
Thank you. That was our Kim Ji-yeon at the nation's defense ministry. Staying with that story and taking a direct aim, North Korea claims to have rejected South Korea's offer to send a special envoy to Pyongyang in light of the flare-up in tensions on the Korean peninsula. It also labeled it an unrealistic offer and one that won't fool them. For more on this, we connect live to our presidential correspondent Kim Min-ji with more. So, Min-ji, any reaction from the top office this morning?
Se-min, no word yet from South Korea's presidential office, but yesterday a top Blue House official said he had not heard of sending a special envoy to North Korea, although South Korea's proposals for inter-Korean cooperation or a potential summit remain open. So we'll have to see what comes out of the top office today. Now, earlier this morning, the North State media said Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, had flatly rejected South Korea's offer to send a special envoy, calling it a sinister proposal. It said the South Korean side sent a message that President Moon Jae-in wanted to send special envoys, Chung Eui-yong, the director of national security, and Seo Hoon, the head of the nation's intel agency, to meet Chairman Kim. And referring to President Moon as the ruler of South Korea, it criticized what it claimed to be a nonsensical approach, saying it doesn't work on them. It added that Kim Yo-jong warned that South Korea should stop making unrealistic offers, but rather take appropriate action. Separately, in a statement, Kim Yo-jong criticized President Moon's message of cooperation and exchange between the two sides to mark 20 years since the first ever inter-Korean summit. She said Monday's message contained no measures to resolve the current situation, saying South Korea's failure to stop activists sending propaganda leaflets across the border sparked the tensions. She added it was Seoul that had failed to abide by the Panmunjom Declaration to end all hostilities, ending they can no longer discuss inter-Korean relations. Now, the developments and the speed at which this is unfolding are a shock, no doubt, for the administration that has been reaching out to the north despite Tuesday's warning of strong action in response to any move that would worsen the situation on the Korean Peninsula. That's all I have for this hour. Back to you, Semin.
All right, Kim Min-ji at the nation's top office. Warning North Korea following its military provocation, the U.S. is calling on the regime to refrain from further actions that are counterproductive. This U.S. State Department told Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency on Tuesday that Washington fully supports South Korea's efforts in regards to inter-Korean relations, explaining it's well aware of the escalation in tensions. A senior U.S. government official added that Washington will remain in close coordination with South Korea. Following North Korea's destruction of the Inter-Korean Liaison Office, neighboring powerhouses, China, Japan, and Russia, have all responded to the latest fluid developments on the Korean Peninsula. They all stress that they are cooperating closely with related parties to monitor the situation. Our Kim Hyo-sun with more.
North Korea's latest military provocation, coming on the heels of escalated inter-Korean tensions, has prompted neighboring countries to respond swiftly. China's foreign ministry stressed Tuesday that peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula are crucial.
North and South Korea are of the same people. As a close neighbor, China has always hoped that the Korean Peninsula maintain peace and stability.
Beijing, however, did not comment further on Pyongyang's denotation of the Inter-Korean Liaison Office. Chinese media outlets also reported on the latest developments, citing Seoul's Unification Ministry as well as the North's state-run media. Some 30 minutes after the regime's bombing, the Japanese government also released its official stance, with its Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga highlighting close cooperation among Tokyo, Seoul, and Washington. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also said he will be watching the situation closely.
I am aware of the explosion by North Korea. On North and South Korean relations, we hope tensions will not rise further. We will firmly and closely coordinate with South Korea and the United States to analyze information and to deal with the situation.
The heightened tensions on the Korean Peninsula also caused concerns in Moscow. The Kremlin called for restraint from all parties.
We, of course, are closely monitoring what is happening on the Korean Peninsula. It elicits concern, of course. We call for restraint from all parties. At the moment, there are no particular plans to carry out high-level and highest-level contacts.
Russian media outlets also covered the North's military provocation as breaking news and also cited Pyongyang's official Korean Central News Agency's report, which explained the regime destroyed the liaison office in a, quote, terrific explosion. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
And South Korean stocks got off to a rather rocky start this morning, but not a dreadful one due to the rising concerns over a possible military confrontation with North Korea on top of concerns regarding a second wave of coronavirus. For more on this, we have our Ji-young on the line for us. So Ji-young, despite the geopolitical and health concerns, the markets have so far taken it on their stride.
Right, Senin. The benchmark Kospi dropped 0.23% at the opening, starting at 2,133, and the tech-heavy Kosdaq was also down more than 0.47% at 732 upon opening. The South Korean currency has weakened as well. It has risen to 1,214 won against the greenback, and the one-month dollar Korean won non-deliverable rose 0.3% after Tuesday's confrontation. The Korean won stood at 1,213 mark as of Wednesday, 9:45 a.m. South Korean stocks slid in after-hours trading on Tuesday in reaction to North Korea's provocation. The share price of top tech firms Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix dropped more than 1% in after-hours trading on the news. Tuesday's rally came on the back of foreign investors and institutions, but South Korean markets have been generally recovering, with the country's benchmark Kospi index closely erasing its year-to-date losses over the past couple of weeks as retail investors flock back looking for bargains. The deputy governor of the Bank of Korea said this morning that the North Korea developments shouldn't have a major impact on the markets. He added that the BOK will keep an eye on the situation. That's all I have for now, but I'll bring more updates in a later newscast. Back to you, Semin.
I'm Jiyoung with the latest on the market. Thank you. Shifting focus, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is set to meet a Chinese delegation at a U.S. military base in Hawaii to discuss bilateral ties that have soured since the start of the year. According to Hong Kong's South China Morning Post, the two sides will meet on Wednesday with Jiechi, a state councilor and member of the Communist Party's Politburo, leading the Chinese delegation. Sources say the agenda will likely include the response to COVID-19, arms control, trade, Hong Kong, North Korea, and tit-for-tat moves against journalists. Now, the meeting will mark the first between Pompeo and Yang since they spoke on the phone in April. A military flare-up that could have global repercussions. The border standoff between India and China has turned deadly for the first time in decades. The Indian Army reported the deaths of their 20 soldiers on Tuesday from the conflict that is flaring up at the de facto border in the Himalayas. Our Choi Jong-yun with more.
The Indian Army confirmed Tuesday that at least 20 Indian soldiers were killed in a violent face-off with Chinese troops Monday night, along the two countries' de facto border in the Himalayas. 3 deaths were earlier reported, but a further 17 troops who were critically injured died a day later. Situated in the Himalayan Galwan Valley, the line of actual control, a loose demarcation line, was formed after the 1962 war to separate Indian-controlled territory from an area administered by the Chinese government. Despite the agreement, flare-ups and tensions have been a regular occurrence over the years, with each claiming the side were invading. However, this week's incident marks the first military deaths in over 40 years of the two countries' border dispute. The standoff has intensified over the last 6 weeks, and a large troop buildup has been taking place for weeks on both sides of the border. Then, during a de-escalation process, Monday's incident occurred, which involved a physical fight using stones and batons, but not gunfire. The Chinese government claims the Indian forces violated the consensus with China on easing the border situation after commander-level talks and provoked a physical conflict.
We solemnly demand that India strictly restrain its frontline troops in accordance with the consensus, refrain from crossing the borderline, provoking troubles, or taking any unilateral actions that may complicate the border situation.
While the Chinese confirmed casualties on their side but provided no specific numbers, Indian news agencies cited sources as saying 43 were killed or injured on the Chinese side. Choi Jong-yun, Arirang News.
Good morning. Depending on where you are today, you'll need sunblock or rain gear. About the rain first. Those of you on Jeju will need to prepare for downpours for the next few days. It's going to rain from this afternoon and could pound up to 200 millimeters over on Jeju Island. Temperature-wise, compared to yesterday, readings will be a few notches lower for the southern parts of the country, while central regions will be as hot or even hotter, including Gangneung and Chuncheon. Central parts of the country will also be under mostly sunny skies with strong UV rays, so don't forget your sunblock. Southern regions, though, will see more clouds rolling in as the day goes on today. In fact, Seoul will see hot, sunny, and humid weather for the next 5 days, while this Sunday marks summer solstice already. Then the heat will get even stronger next week. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for news around the world.
And that does it for this edition of Arirang News, but we'll be back with more of the day's headlines, including the latest rounds of provocation from North Korea in our next newscast coming up at noon Korea time, so stay close. Thanks for watching.